Segment 2, Gold and Black Live. It's great to be some of my heroes, which these two guys are, and the Purdue Rose Bowl team. I'm supposed to be a journalist and not gush. Number 83, Marion Griffin. Number 86, which I'm going to ask you how you got to be number 86 and be a defensive back, but that'll be a question. George Catavolos and Marion Griffin join us here for Segment 2 of Gold and Black Live. Welcome to the show, and welcome back to West Lafayette. My first question for both, do you have any eligibility left?
No way. Marion looks like he can play.
I think he can still play. So Marion is a tight end on those the Rose Bowl team, and certainly George Catavolos. You started, you were defensive back, but did you come to Purdue to play both?
Well, I came back thinking to play wide receiver instead of Ohio State wanted me as a defensive back. And, Purdue wanted me as a wide receiver, and I proved that. A funny story that Greasy and I always talk about it is, his freshman year, we had 8 quarterbacks on our freshman team, and as far as throwing ability, he could match some of these guys. Well, he stayed all summer, and he worked and got his throwing motion. So the first practice, he buried a ball deep in my chest, and it must have bounced 20 feet. The next practice, they asked me if I wanted to be a defensive back. I said, okay, I'll be a defensive back.
And the rest is history, so to speak. In terms of Marion, you come from Chicago Vocational. You're the second most famous, or maybe the third. Keena Turner too, third most famous player to come from Chicago Vocational. Of course, Dick Butkus as well. What got you to Purdue? I mean, what brought you to Purdue? Who recruited you? And do you remember that first meeting with Jack Mullenkoff when you were being recruited?
Well, I was recruited by I think it was John.
Jardine?
Yeah, Jardine.
Yeah, John Jardine. Okay.
Jardine, yeah. I was at one time I was set on going to Michigan.
Yeah.
And went up to Michigan, and it was very cold.
Yeah.
Came down here in Lafayette. It was nice, and the weather wasn't bad. It was nice, and met some people down here that were coming from Chicago at the same time, and we decided that we were going to decide on Purdue.
Purdue has had a great pipeline, especially in your days, Cleveland area, northeast Ohio, Pennsylvania, Chicago pipeline as well. Did you grow up? I mean, when was George's first time? I mean, obviously, when you grew up in Cleveland, you know about Ohio State. What was the first time you heard about Purdue?
Well, George Steinbrenner was a big Purdue fan, and I think he was a graduate assistant.
1955.
And he was friends with my high school coach. They went to college together at Capital University.
Yeah.
So he started giving me ideas about Purdue my senior year in high school, and then there was 4 of us that came from Cleveland. 2 of us, Joe Caruso and myself, came from Cleveland West Tech, and then we had Chick Felice from Benedictine and a Bob Herrick from St. Joe, and 3 out of 4 graduated from Purdue, so we're very proud of that.
Yeah. And Marion, when you got the chance to play, and the offenses were different, though Purdue's offense at that time threw the ball a little bit more than most, but your role as a tight end, you were known as a very good blocker. But now that you look at the way tight ends are, the Gronkowskis of the world, what do you think when you watch them now, the way as compared to the way it was then?
I should have been raising my hands and throw me the ball, Bob. Throw me the ball, Bob. But in most cases, my job was to protect Bob's backside. You know, I tease him that you couldn't have got those passes off if I'd have let my guy come around in on the backside and take it out. So in many cases, the tight end responsibility was protecting the quarterback's backside. But there were times when I did get a few passes, possession passes and so forth.
He was a lot better than that. He's not giving himself as a
humility is part of the deal here.
No, he was an outstanding all the way around.
1965, the season before, you had a very good team and were beaten by Michigan State on homecoming, as I recall, a very tough game. Going into the 66 season, I mean, you knew that in those days teams could not repeat, so Michigan State could not go to the Rose Bowl, but Purdue had never gotten over the hump. I mean, did you think much about that looking back at it, or are you guys just your typical college students? It was a week-to-week proposition for
I
you?
think Marion will say the same thing. In '65, when we lost Michigan State 14 to 10, that was a better team as his teams were in '67 and maybe '68 than what we were in '66. But at that time there was only 4 or 5 major bowl games, so it was tough to go. And Purdue, there was only the Rose Bowl, but in '66 we had young sophomores that were out, from Marion to Leroy Keys to Chuck Kyle, that were going to be outstanding football players for Purdue. Had a good junior class, and we had a good with Bob Greasy leading the show, John Charles, 2 All-Americans leading the senior class. So we had a chance, and we played well, and almost in those 11 games, everybody stood up in a certain game, whether it was somebody catching a pass, Jim Finley catching a pass, Marion catching a pass, or was somebody like defense Frank Burke blocking a punt against Michigan.
Couple of them, yeah.
It was that's what got us over the hump and got us a chance. We only lost 2 games that year, and we lost them to the number 1 and number 2, and I think we finished in one poll 6th in the country. So very proud of that.
The highest Purdue team's ever been ranked, at least in the modern era, at the end of the season. So that's not too shabby. All right, take it back.
That was the 2 games we lost was to Michigan State and Notre Dame. And
they played the famous 10-10 tie game
right.
the same day that you were playing Indiana, as I recall. So and earning your spot to Pasadena. All right, when you go back now, and I'm pulling out some memories of the Illinois game, which was really a homecoming game that really got you in the right. Obviously beating Michigan in the last second up at Michigan with the block kick by Frank Burke was very important. But how about it coming back from some adversity? Bob Greasy throws 5 interceptions in that game. They have a late pick 6, and you're down and going into the 4th quarter. I think it was 21 to 10. Memories from what it was like, or if you watched that from just because you won the game.
I guess to me in that game, and that wasn't Bob's best game.
Yeah.
But the one play that I can always remember, he threw an interception, and this guy, a guy by the name of Sullivan was having a heck of a day, and he was coming up the sideline, and he's scoring, and I watched Bob from the middle of the field take an angle and run him down, and if he would have scored, they probably would have iced the game. But the effort he showed, is the type of person he is. He's a true All-American. He's, one of the great Hall of Fame in the National Football League, All-American and all that. But that effort really showed what type of guy he is, because he could have very easily, not turned it down, but not made the effort. But it was a great effort by him.
Yeah. I'd like to give kudos to our offensive coordinator at the time, Bob DeMoss.
Yes, who's here today?
Because Bob never wavered with Bob throwing the ball and passing. Because there were many times when I was up there and I was wondering, are we passing again? Yeah. But each time, a situation called for a pass, Bob got the green light to pass, and we pulled this out.
Yeah. What were the coaches like? Give us a feel for Jack Mullenkoff in the locker room at halftime in a game. Was he a yeller? Was he a guy that did you spend more time with your position coaches? What are your memories of Coach Mullenkoff?
I think Jack didn't do a whole lot of coaching at the time during the games, but he was the type of coach that would get your attention.
Okay.
He would put the game into perspective and what you had to do to win.
Yeah.
And if he had to kick something or he had to grab somebody to get your attention, he would do it. And there was times when Jack would discipline a guy as he came off the field if he did something that screwed up. Jack had no problems with grabbing you and telling you that, hey, you don't do that again, or you're going to be sitting over here on the bench. But I think he only, not only did he have the attention of his players, but he had the attention of his assistant coaches.
Yeah.
the coaches would say, "Don't make me look bad in front of the old man, because I'm going to have to answer to it."
Yeah.
Well, he was a no-nonsense type of individual. And he was tough. He could use some good language to get your attention.
Colorful.
But he really was a soft-hearted guy. If a player needed help, whether it was academically, athletically, and would come to him, he would wholeheartedly work hard to get it. I agree with the staff, the offensive, defensive staffs had great game plans. Bob DeMoss was, at that time, the genius of the offensive coaches. A lot of people would try to copy the stuff that he did. And then Alan Hager was on defense and also did an excellent job. With those sophomores and juniors, we averaged giving up 14 points a game for those 11 games. So it was an outstanding staff.
Yeah. All your years in football, George, in the NFL, what were your takeaways from the coaching staff, the things that you lived with and used in your time as coaching? I mean, you said, boy, this is something I know when you were being instructed or coached as a collegiate that you knew you were going to take forward.
Well, first of all, you have to earn the respect of your players. They got to know that you're with them and that they're trying to improve them. The knowledge of the game, everybody can say it, but then you also got to tell them what are the weaknesses. You got to look at the strengths and weaknesses of the players and try to help them and try to develop the players. I was fortunate enough to work with Bob DeMoss when he was head coach. I was played and was a graduate assistant for Coach Malenkoff, and they were just straight guys. I mean, what they said you believed, and they were honest with you. If you played bad, they weren't going to mince their words. If you're good, they might just pat you on the back as you're going out. They won't really give you a lot of accolades, but they were fair with everybody. And so in my going back to my coaching, I would always look as one to earn the respect of the players, help them develop, and get them in the right position to make plays.
Marion, for you, your successful professional life and living after that Purdue football experience and the ups and downs, because even if you only lose 2 games a year, there's still, you have good things and bad things happen. What have been your biggest takeaways throughout your professional life?
Well, I think it's a discipline that you have to take on.
Yeah.
And I think I learned a lot of that here at Purdue. When we first came in as freshmen, there was times when we didn't really take things too serious, and we would kind of goof off, and sometimes we didn't like what we were doing in practice. And we had coaches come to you and say, if you're going to get through this, and you accepted to play here, you got to learn to like some of these things. And so I took that. It says, even though some things that you may not be altogether happy to do, but sometimes you have to learn to like it. So you might not like running those laps and after practice drills and things like that, but it's important that we do this so that the results that will come about when you're playing will be positive. So even though you don't like it, learn to like it. And that was some of the things I tell my kids. You may not like it, but learn to like it.
Yeah, great advice. All right, now if we have George Catavolos here, we'd be remiss not asking about the play. And in Purdue football history, it is probably, there's Drew Brees in 2000 and to Seth Morales, but there's George Catavolos' 2-point conversion interception that sealed the win in the Rose Bowl. Take us through that play and what you remember about it.
What I remember about it is that if they score, we lose, and sort of put the pressure. We like I said, we had a good defensive football team, and like when somebody makes a play, it's because of some other people. On that particular play, they lined up with trips. People to our left, their offensive right. The quarterback sprinted out. We had 2 outstanding outside linebackers, Bob Holmes and George Olean. You could knock these guys off your feet. And George Olean immediately hemmed up the quarterback, so he couldn't sprint out. He had to pull up and throw it a little quicker than he wanted to. John Charles, our All-American safety, was over one of their top receivers, and that receiver was supposed to come in and pick me. And John Charles, I mean, just jammed him up on the line of scrimmage, so he couldn't get out. So I had the easy job. They had the two hard jobs. And I just slid in and happened to make the play. I probably was trying to knock it down, and somehow it stuck in my hands, but I'm glad it did.
I mean, you were on the sidelines at the time. What were you thinking?
Way to go, George.
That's what you were thinking.
Yeah, the play before we're not discussing because they ran a corner out to beat us for the touchdown. And if you talk to Greasy will say, well, that's your fault. And I'm trying to say, hey, it's a free safety. You don't have a 7 route, you know, but I'm not going to blow out another man's candle and light my own. You know, so I was the closest guy to him on that play. So I was glad to get the chance to stop the 2-point play.
And so what were you thinking sitting on the sidelines? Were you, and did it surprise you that USC went for 2?
Yeah.
A little bit. I mean, it's a tie. Would ended up in a game. Probably would have ended up in a tie. Though the game really didn't. That's one thing people forget is that USC got the ball back with a couple seconds to go.
No, they got it with over a minute to go.
And the goalpost had been torn down, as I recall, or something of that.
Yeah, but they weren't close enough to kick a field goal.
Yeah.
And the other thing that John McKay was a
Purdue person.
Was a Purdue person, but he was a riverboat gambler.
Yeah.
He was going to take his shots, and back then they used to say, a tie's like kissing your sister.
Yeah.
And he went for the win.
Yeah, and that ends up making it a good story from Purdue annals on down the line. All right, guys, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
And really enjoy your time here. It's great to have you back. And maybe you can infuse some winning vibe on the Boilermakers tomorrow for homecoming as Purdue takes on Iowa. We're going to go take a short break, come back with segment 3. I'm going to have Jim Bonk and Jim Finley, I think, will be our guests. It depends who all shows up, but we'll make it work no matter what. Stay tuned for our final segment of Gold and Black Live.